Hey there, and welcome to the latest episode of Kiln Restaking Rendez-Vous. I'm Edgar, protocol specialist at Kiln, the leading enterprise-grade staking platform. And today I'm not alone. I'm joined by Ben, my co-host, who is also my counterpart at Coinbase Cloud because he's senior protocol specialist there. And joining us today is Jon Kol, the CEO and co-founder at Hyperlane, to talk about the wonderful Hyperlane AVS. Jon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here and tell you, really everything there is to know about Hyperlane more broadly, and then kind of our plans for this AVS and, the different phases that we want to transition for it. Because I think there is a phase one that's cool, but not so cool, not as cool as we can get to. And there's a phase two, or let's call it a more end game phase, that I think is really impactful and really interesting, but will certainly depend on the risk appetite of the good folks who are restaking.
Super interesting. Ben, how are you doing? Can you maybe introduce yourself for the audience?
Yes, absolutely. How's it going, y'all? What do you call that? Name's Ben Rodriguez. As Edgar said, senior protocol specialist here at Coinbase Cloud. I interact with many different protocols, Hyperlane included, and we're just trying to assess from a perspective of what we want to look at in terms of what protocols to support and all that fun stuff from the Coinbase side. I've been in crypto for 10 years now, and I'm an old guy when it comes to crypto. Very, very old guy. I'm a boomer, so but
you and both. I feel old for basically being around for I've been working crypto for 6 years. I've been around for 8.
Yeah,
but 10 you are.
Yeah. Bought my first Bitcoin in 2013, so 2024 now. Yeah, a little bit. There were some people before me, of course. But yeah, been at Coinbase for about 2 years now, and I cover the Ethereum ecosystem, if you think about it, the modular ecosystems, right? So I cover all of that, and that does include EigenLayer as a validator middleware type thing, and then obviously Hyperlane being an AVS on top of, or about to be an AVS on top of EigenLayer, and also interoperability solutions, which Hyperlane is going to be talking to us about today. So pleasure to see y'all.
Cool. Perfect. Then we'll start this off then. Jon, I would love to have your background story, how did you start working in blockchain and what led you to build Hyperlane?
Yeah, of course. So I guess it's a little strange. It's a funny story. At least for me, it's a funny story. I was at Morgan Stanley. I was a bond. I guess at the time I was selling bonds, and then later on moved to trade bonds. Very fascinating, really, really interesting stuff. It's the most boring existence you can think of. And I'm at a friend's birthday party. This is spring or summer of 2016. And I have this, friend for us. I went to school at Berkeley. This is a school friend, and he'd done really well. Even the time where we were students at university, and he had a bunch of cash just sitting idle. And that, he just comes up and he's like, "Hey, Jon, all my friends are putting all their money into Ethereum. Should I do it too? I think I should do it. What do you think? Is it a good idea?" And he's coming to me because he's like, "Oh, well, you work in finance, so you should know something about money." I'm like, "I don't know, dude. I don't know. It's a good idea. I don't know if it's a bad idea. I just don't know. I've heard of people at Berkeley and we're talking about it, some friends, but I hadn't spent any meaningful time on it." And he's like, "Well, this is a serious thing for me." And I'm like, "I know, dude. I know you're going to use that money for a house. So now you're talking about buying this random thing I've never heard of." And so we spend the rest of the next 2 days basically. We just kind of we're hanging out, and we spend a bunch of time looking into Ethereum. And I go to work on that Monday morning, just super pilled. I'm like, "You guys have no idea what's coming. You can't even imagine what's coming." What's funny is on our trading desk, we were all we were working on the municipal bond trading desk. And like, this is, as of at least, that period in history, that was like still the most opaque part and most illiquid part of like the US bond market. And so it seemed like, oh, this will be the one where automation and like tech innovation is going to take the longest. And what people were really concerned with were things like auto bidders, which is basically just like some type of algo that looks at the different bonds that are coming up and they're bidding them. And so like that should obfuscate our expertise here as, the trading desk. And I'm like, you're worried about the auto bidder? You don't know what's coming. There's gonna be decentralized bond desks on Ethereum. This thing is coming. I don't know when, but it's coming. And I like gradually become more and more of a crypto nut, and I get viewed as that on this trading desk. And like I'm fine with it. I've been like a weirdo, I've been kind of like on the outskirts of normal accepted beliefs my entire life. So like even before crypto, I was kind of like the oddball on the trading desk. So it fit people's mental models of what I was, and I spend the next year and a half just getting more and more into it. Right, like February rolls around, you get your banker bonuses. Those are great. I'm like, I gotta get deeper into crypto. What should I do? Instead of like a reasonable smart degenerate who would say, I'm just gonna take all of this and I'm gonna dump it into Ethereum. I'm a bond guy, and I had some like family complications, was paying for the parents' mortgage and whatnot. So I was like very concerned about like losing all of it. So I was like, I'll do a safe thing. I'll find a crypto bond. And so mining is like a crypto bond. You got your, money spent on gear. That's like the principal. And then you get your, your mining rewards. Those are like the coupons, the cash flows. Huge mistake, but I don't know that at the time. And so like I drive, if I live in Oakland, I drive to like the nearest, Best Buy, start picking up GPUs. I go down to my parents in LA. I go to the Fry's Electric. Somehow managed to raid up like 36, different NVIDIA GPUs, set up like 6x6 racks, and we're off to the races. So I'm now mining Zcash and I'm mining Ethereum. And I spend the next year getting more into crypto as a miner. And eventually, like end of the year, got my first job. I joined a macro hedge fund called Passport Capital that was opening up its crypto team, and was an investor there, and like did a few things. Like was I guess the most notable thing there, like my first DA was like the first funding round for Solana. That was a fun one. And then from there went to Galaxy, Noah's firm, and worked with him there, and co-led the investment team at Galaxy for a few years. And throughout all this time, I'm like super into crypto because of this concept of it's an internet computer that anyone can use to do whatever the hell they want. But the idea that like, well, the computer you're using and the one that I'm using, they can't talk to each other, it seemed like for a dummy like me, seemed very strange. And be like, oh, well, this is going to be solved like in a year. And every year it kept feeling like it's still a year away. 2021 rolls around and you're like, well, really as far as we've gotten with this is that we have some designs that let us, like move tokens around. But no one's tried to do something deeper than that. So one thing leads to another. As an investor, I found myself to be like on the, far right edge of the distribution when it comes to like people who care about this and who were interested in it and who were like studious about this topic. And so somehow, a few people end up in a room and they start talking, and then like before you know it, it's like, oh shit, we are now working on this thing that is going to later on be known as Hyperlane. And so we started working on it like in earnest in late 21 and started the company, everything by like the early part of 2022. And, now 2 years into it, I run what's called Abacus Works. That's like the development company. That's the major contributor to the Hyperlane protocol. We've also got like at least 6 or 7 other companies that are making really material contributions, which is awesome. And yeah, I could tell you all about it. Sorry, that was convoluted, but I'm having fun today. So
does that mean that In 2021, you were still running ETH miners?
No, I actually, sorry, I didn't get it at that part. By like April of 2018, I was like, fuck this. This sucks. Writing, I can't tell you how much I hate mining. I hate it. I think it's the worst thing ever. I think no one should do it unless they are like willing to just make that their primary endeavor. I think it is, a complete waste of time. The only thing that was good about it is that like it was so unpleasant to operate that I learned a lot about like how chains work. And so there's, the way I rationalize it, because I have to, because clearly the financial difference between taking like that money and buying GPUs and mining with it versus like just buying Ethereum straight up was massive. I'm like, well, you know what? If I had just done that, I'd be one of those people. Because in San Francisco in 2018, there were lots of, let's call them kids like me, who thought they knew something about investing and thought they were like wizards because they just bought some ETH and like it had gone way up. But in reality, they're just dudes. And so the way I rationalized, like, oh, if I'd done that, I'd just be one of those dudes. And like, I wouldn't be able to like have the impact I've had in the industry or like, get as smart as I did. I just think I was a wizard. And so that's my rationalization. I hate mining and I've stopped mining.
You missed out on some nice MEV blocks. But
I did. Yeah, there was not a lot of MEV in 2017 and 18. Probably the most was like in December when CryptoKitties first came around.
Oh yeah. I mean, 2020, 2021, it was crazy.
It was bananas.
So what you started to build Hyperlane? Was it like an interoperability protocol from the get-go?
Yes. Yeah. So it was always about, I guess there was one big change that happened with Hyperlane, but it was always about interoperability. At first, it was about how do we make it super easy for developers to connect any application across any chain. And, we really focused on this notion of like what I used to like calling like shared state applications, apps that, why are you, because people were deploying their app and still do on multiple chains, but they're basically like little islands. It's like, how can we create the pathways between them so that, Aave on Ethereum knows what's going on with Aave on Polygon. And then I think what we realized was, people actually they like talking about it. They're not so interested in building it. And the need there, like the tangible thing that someone gains from that is not very clear. So in the common, VCs like to talk about, oh, what is a painkiller and what is like a vitamin? In 2022, the notion of like connecting your app between multiple chains was certainly not a painkiller for anybody. Like everyone was able to conduct business on those deployments on single chains, and there would be a real nice to have, but not necessarily something that changes their reality by doing that. Add to that it's actually like substantially different, paradigm to develop in. In a single chain, everything is atomic and everything is synchronous. And you have just, I would say, more than half of people who are building in crypto have never built anywhere else. And so the fact that like the entire internet basically is built asynchronously does not apply, because you have people who have their formative years as engineers happened in a crypto context where they're building on a single chain. And again, everything is synchronous, everything is atomic, and you go to an interchain environment and now those two things break. Anyone who tells you something about like cross-chain activity being atomic is basically just omitting the part where now you need to you basically are creating another blockchain that just takes orders from other blockchains, but there's no escaping around that. And similarly, the issue of like synchronicity comes in. So it's not insurmountable, but just there was a mismatch between that expectation on our part that like, wait a second, the entire internet is asynchronous, people will figure this out, and the actual available expertise in the majority of crypto teams, which was like, we don't know how to build things asynchronously, or even if we do know how to do it, we don't know how to do it for these types of crypto apps because all the existing ones where we would draw our inspiration from, they require that. And so sometime over the summer, I had my brother, I got him a gig working with Lattice, like the folks who made the Dark Forest game. And these folks were like super into ZK. And at one point, they start talking about how like, oh yeah, you know, the ZK thing is just not going to work for us. Like it's not there in the capacity that we need to. So we're giving up on it because Optimism had built this thing at the time. It's called Bedrock that like lets anyone easily create a chain or a rollup that looks a lot like Optimism. And then I was like, my word, these people have basically like for years been evangelizing ZK, and they are now telling me that that's not going to work for them, and this is what they're going with. I'm completely changing my worldview because I always thought there's going to be a lot of chains, but this like added zeros to that. And I go back to my team and I'm like, you know, from what our architecture is, we should be able to, like, I think, I go to them, I'm like, I'm not sure about this, but I think we're the only interoperability protocol that's architected in such a way where like actually anyone could put it anywhere. And they go, yeah, it's true. Great. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. This is like, we're going to make a massive bet that this thing, you know, that basically a lot of people who were going to build some app are then going to have to reach their potential. We're going to have to create their own chain or rollup. And we will have like, we will be the thing that solves that problem for them of like how they connect with everybody else. It was clear that people were moving to making this increasingly easier and easier and easier. But what good is it to have a chain that can like you could spin up a chain in 5 minutes, but then well it's an island, it can't talk to anybody. So what is going to be the corresponding like linkage between these chains being spun up in 5 minutes that could be as easily spun up? And so that's like that was that one change that we had, you know, going from hey, wait, let's focus on apps to actually no, let's focus on chains, but not all chains, this specific variant of chain.
Sweet. So that's really cool. I think like, you know, this space like evolves very, very quickly, right? So a thesis that might have happened like 2 years ago, you know, is probably going to evolve into a new thesis like today, right? I think, you know, there's going to be kind of like a couple of like interrelated questions here. I'm more than happy to like remind you and all that fun stuff. So like the thing is, your protocol has been live, right, for about 2 years now. I mean, I've been talking to y'all since y'all like Abacus, right? Your Abacus, yeah. You were like Abacus protocol before and whatnot, right? I've known y'all for a while. So like you've been live for a couple years now, right? Can you share?
Yeah, almost.
Yeah, right? Can you share some of those learnings after being live for like 2 years, right? Like similar, like expand a little bit on what you were talking about. And then why you decided to choose to move to EigenLayer. What has changed about your thesis, right, around interoperability and your vision around interoperability around these decisions?
Of course. So, you know, I'd say like on learning, especially if you are like in a similar position, you really like, I think it's imperative to just have something out there. So for us, like, you know, we around the summer of 22, around that time, like we had a choice of, well, we could take longer and like ship this thing with more features. Like one of the things we wanted to add was economic security. Or we could just like launch it in a very, very narrow like proto form. It just see what happens. See like learn from people trying to use it, have it go around hackathons, talk to different apps. And that was very useful. I think, you know, people are always afraid of doing that because once you do that, like it's out there and people can like observe it. And so it's no longer like a secret, and people like, you know, that period where your thing is still a secret, it's very reassuring because like you don't know if it sucks yet. No one's telling you that it sucks. No one's also telling you that it's great or not, but there's a lot of like, there's a real sense of like security there from how people perceive themselves. So it's not the right move for everybody, but certainly like sometimes it is the right move. So I'd encourage people to do that. On the like adding economic security to our protocol was something we always wanted to do. So not so much a change in like thesis, but more of a change in approach. So how do we even end up talking to Sriram? We were talking, I forget who it was actually at this point because it was so long ago, talking to someone, some friend. I was like, hey, yeah, we really see like economic security playing a big role in how Hyperlane chains, connect to each other. And he goes, oh, well, did you read like this paper? And I'm like, you think I've got time to read these papers? Like, of course I don't. But like, I've heard about this guy. He's like, okay, cool. I'll put you, you should talk to Sriram. And we started talking. And he said, hey, perfect. We're working on just this thing. It should be live like pretty soon. So, and I'm like, great. So we don't have to, you're telling me like you're going to be live. Great. So we're not going to have to go and spend our time to build like this big thing. We just have to spend our time building a little thing that fits on your bigger thing. That sounds great. And so that's like now when our work with EigenLayer to like get this AVS is, so we didn't spend too much time talking about Hyperlane, but with Hyperlane, instead of having like enshrined security, you have just anything that could be a state attestation or a state proof can be used to like secure messages that go through Hyperlane. And so we want the AVS to be exactly one of these modules and to provide economic security wherever it's available.
Great. And if you had to explain Hyperlane to, let's not say a 5-year-old, let's say like a 10 or 15-year-old, and try to maybe like work your way up to like maybe a crypto expert. My understanding, and I'm not a crypto expert yet, but would be that it would be comparable to an IBC for chains that are not necessarily Tendermint.
Yes, it's very much like IBC inspired. I know some people get upset when I say that. Like I think of it as like a spiritual successor to IBC. Some of the people who built IBC helped us build Hyperlane. And I think if you get those people in the room, they will a lot of times tell you like, oh yeah, there's a whole lot we would have done different. So from a starting point of like, hey, IBC is what we thought in 2021 and 2022 was like the best way to do it. But the constraints that IBC had, we felt were too limiting. And so how do we make different trade-offs to arrive at like something that is maximally extensible? Right, because we, that original goal that we drifted from slightly was to let any developer easily connect their app between any chain. And so the any chain part was really important. So you didn't want to just say, well, like, oh, only chains that look like this. No. Any chain, and take that seriously. And so how do you do that? With IBC, yes, it's true that like IBC can actually support it doesn't have to only be like light client verification, but that does require like a rewriting of the IBC client. That's a ton of effort. Whereas like with Hyperlane, like we basically make that we've created something which is just, hey, this system can pass any arbitrary bytes between blockchains. It does it primarily in smart contracts. Like as a developer, you're just interfacing with a contract. There is some off-chain infra, like notably the relayer, which is like an untrusted agent. It's just, it basically is like a delivery guy. It just takes something from say Ethereum and then, initiates a transaction on like Solana. And so wanted to, again, like focus on maximal extensibility and allow for new security models to come and be developed pretty much by anyone. And so like have the security be something that's expressed like at the edge instead of like so deep in the stack, right? Like it can't be that you need to reinvent Hyperlane to be able to support a new security mode. You just need to be able to say, hey, here's a way of like securing information. Here's a cool way to do state attestations or do state proofs. And I want to wrap those with like some Hyperlane, let's call them like idioms, and make it fit here. So like right now, there is someone who's about to finish their work integrating the succinct prover as a Hyperlane security module. What does that mean? It means that wherever someone is running that prover, like it can be used to secure messages going out of Hyperlane. And so in that sense, that's like a core difference from IBC. But like if you did a schematic of like how the two things work, there's a lot of similarities because again, like we think IBCs are really, really first completely game changing, right? Like there's a reason you want to be its spiritual successor because it did a ton right. And that it's not to say that it did certain things wrong. It's just like, we don't like how it did those certain things. We wanted to do them different. And so that's why like a lot of times people ask us like, why not just work on IBC more? Like you can go ahead and do that. Like it's a free country. They're not stopping you from doing that. We just wanted to do this thing different. And like, I don't think we could consider it to be, it can run side by side with IBC, like as we do right now with a bunch of Cosmos chains where they use Hyperlane to communicate with EVM chains, Solana, and different rollups. But that's not, a lot of times the assets that they're broadcasting are actually like IBC denoms, like is the case with some of our more popular like TIA, the Celestia token, like those routes. So here are the two things kind of working in concert. And sorry, this whole time actually didn't go into explaining Hyperlane, so I could do that too if you want.
Yeah, for maybe start for the 10-year-olds out there that really want to understand how Hyperlane works. Yes, but very hard to pronounce.
No, you're good. So for the 10-year-olds, there are three components for Hyperlane. There is a mailbox. This is just like a contract. Think of it like as a program that runs on chain. It functions as the on-chain API that a developer interacts with to send and receive information between chains. And that information can be anything. It could be assets. It could be like a function call. It could be like a text message. Not that you should do that, but it could be. The second component is the security module. In practice, right now, a lot of the security modules are just like validator committees, varying sizes. But they can also take the form, as I mentioned, of like different types of state proofs, like ZK proofs. They could also be like an optimistic module. And so we have a bunch that are coming online. And this is, again, if you're in the audience and even if you're a 10-year-old developer, but you're like interested, check out our bounty board. There's a bunch of work that you can take on to wrap different forms of state attestations or state proofs, or even like other interoperability protocols and wrap them as Hyperlane modules. And this is the thing that basically will secure the communication. Like when you send that message from Hyperlane, from Ethereum to Solana, the module is like something that's observing the mailbox on Ethereum and saying, oh, okay, this looks like this transaction was finalized, included a block and then finalized. Everything looks kosher. Cool. Sign off. And then finally, the third component is the relayer. Like we said, it's kind of like just a delivery guy. It's really not a trusted agent. Anyone can run one in practice. It tends to be that either us, Abacus Works, or like the different chain teams are running the relayer. And the relayer looks at the different mailboxes. It says, oh, okay, Ben, I see you're sending a message. And I see, oh, you also included a fee. You're a great guy. I'm gonna, process this for you. So I take your message. I then look to see, okay, there's the security module has, signed off on it appropriately. Looks great. I retrieve their signatures and I take the signatures from that security module. And I basically like initiate the processing of your message at the mailbox of the destination chain. It gets fed in those signatures, and as long as everything looks valid, the message will arrive at its destination. If they weren't valid, it just stops right there. So It'll get included in a block on the destination chain, but it's never going to reach, like, if you were sending something to like Edgar on Solana, it's never going to reach Edgar's address. That's like the very basic of how it works.
Sweet. Thanks. We could go a little bit deeper into that, but I do want to talk a little bit, because you mentioned earlier about phase 1 and phase 2, right?
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
let's talk about that a little bit. And also let's talk about it in the context of timelines, right? In timelines, like, for example, EigenLayer is supposed to launch like, later on this year, right? In terms of Hyperlane readiness to be an AVS on top of EigenLayer, what does that look like in terms of timeline? And how does that fit into your phase 1 and phase 2? And then let's start out with like, what is phase 1 and what is phase 2?
Excellent. Let's do that. So I should clarify, both these phases really only pertain to like the Hyperlane AVS specifically, and not like, they're not broader Hyperlane things. But so let's start with timelines. Right now, based on what we know of the EigenLayer timelines, Hyperlane should be there with its AVS in what I'll soon describe as phase 1. Right around launch, hopefully exactly at launch, but timelines in software are sensitive things, so I think everyone has appreciation for that. And later on, emerging into phase 2. Now, phase 2 actually depends more on willingness of restakers than it does on any like new software that needs to be built on Hyperlane. And so actually, let me get into what these different phases mean. So you're a restaker, like, you have your money in something like Swell or Kelp or, or Renzo or Rio. I don't want to forget anybody. We talked to we love all of you. You guys are all amazing. I'm running on like 4 hours of sleep. So excuse me if I've forgotten anyone. Please take no offense. But you have your money there. Why do you have it there? You have it there because you're like, well, my Ethereum's just sitting. I wanna earn more on it. And so you want to earn more, but you also want to not take a lot of risk. You want to minimize the amount of risk that you're taking. And for the most part, that'll retain to like keeping everything in-house on Ethereum. And so phase 1 is the AVS secures outbound messages from Ethereum. Because one thing, I don't know if I clarified enough just a minute ago when I was talking about like security. Security in Hyperlane is unidirectional. It's always in the outbound direction. So like there's a module, it runs, say, on Ethereum. It then secures what goes out of Ethereum. And then on any other chain, you just like basically subscribe or like enroll to that module. And now you can receive that message. So think of it as kind of like a broadcast. And anywhere where a Hyperlane mailbox exists, that's like a receiver able to receive those broadcasts. And so phase 1, we'll just say like low risk, to only say like there is not anything in like the only thing putting your money at risk as someone who is working with our AVS is like the flashing conditions we have on Ethereum. You can always observe them, so you have like high certainty that it's not happening by accident or it's not happening when it shouldn't be happening. Now, admittedly, that's actually not that interesting, right? Like, I don't know what net new applications are made available because we will be providing economic security on Ethereum. And I feel good about saying that right now, it does not seem to us that even major applications, like there's a couple, there's at least one that's already live, that's, a major DeFi player that's already using Hyperlane to send stuff from Ethereum, and they're doing it without economic security being present. So it does not seem that it is blocking or enabling anything like net new. So phase 1 is cool, but it's not game changing. Phase 2, that can be game changing. Phase 2 is when different restakers are going to get more comfortable with securing the outbound from rollups. So like, think of pretty much every optimistic rollup that you use. Why does it have like that 7-day challenge period? is because like we want to have some type of certainty around the security there. And so like what is it going to take to lower that time? Well, economic security on the amounts that are being withdrawn, I think most people would agree that's a probably effective enough deterrent, against any, malfeasance. And so that is, now you're getting into something that is like, I do think enables net new things. I do think like there are teams who are, right now reluctant because of the absence of economic security to participate in things like that. And so the barrier is not going to be convincing roll-ups. Like they'll be signing up for this left and right. It's how do you convince the restaker that this is risk worth taking? Because an interesting thing happens now is like, how do they know when they should be getting slashed? Because unlike the case where it's on Ethereum, like they can observe Ethereum very easily. Here, like, well, what if they don't trust that roll-up sequencer? Like, do they get, does that become a question? And so that's why I think it'll take more time. And I think that what will be the determining factor in how long it takes before we can go from 1 to 2 is just going to be like a market willingness. I think it's going to be one of those things that happen like, slowly, then suddenly. Because once someone does it and like says, oh, it's been like a month or two and nothing bad happened, I think a bunch of others will be like, well, why aren't we earning this? Why are we earning this? Get in there.
Okay, great. So it'd be like Ethereum at launch, and pretty much like you're going to like there will be clear incentives to get more protocols supported by the operators after that. And does that constitute phase 2?
Yeah. Basically, like, how do we transition this to now you're accepting risk that comes not from transactions originating on Ethereum, but transactions originating on this wide variety of chains. And, I take to my pleasant surprise, there is more willingness than I'd expected. Even at this early stage, no one is willing, like no one is committing to anything, which again, not even expected. But when we kind of describe this to the different restakers we speak to, you see the glint in the eye. You're like, oh, okay, I like that. All right, great. So, pretty excited about it.
So maybe it would be from economic incentives.
It's always the most important thing, right? It's
yeah.
like, and that's actually what, I think that's still the biggest open question with all of this is, right now we get a lot of people saying like, oh yeah, I'm very interested in having economic security. Like, well, it's very interesting. It's great, buddy. But like, what do you want to pay for? It's like, well, I'm interested in having a very nice house like in Soho, but what am I willing to pay for it? Not what it costs. That's why I don't. I mean, that and like actually not having the money are the two reasons why I don't have one. But being interested is one thing. It's like, how are you going to pay for it? Because I think you mentioned earlier MEV, and I like that part of the market because it's the one that is like most clearly just like an open market where incentives and costs and like economic realities determine so much of it. I think the EigenLayer like restaking market is going to be another place where it doesn't feel that way right now because the market isn't live. But as soon as it goes live, I think economic realities will play a very, very large role in it. And maybe some of our assumptions will be wrong. Maybe some of them will be proven right. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing how like people's interest translates into willingness to pay.
Yeah. And actually, it's a great segue into my next question is, what do you think, what kind of form do you think these services, this revenue will take? Do you think you will allow like every rollup to pay in its own rollup token if they have one? Do you think it will be only ETH? How do you kind of envision?
That's a great
type?
question. So I should say the form that we've thought about the most is one where like the restaker ultimately gets ETH, but the end consumer, right, the rollup, is paying in their token. And one of the reasons for that is actually like just purely a technical one, where that is how Hyperlane works today. Is for the most part is that you always pay in the gas token of the chain you're sending from, and the relayer then pays on your behalf in that destination gas. And so like when sending from Ethereum, like I mentioned before, if you're sending to Solana, like Ben doesn't need to have Solana at the outset. Ben just pays in Ethereum, and the relayer spends Solana to process Ben's transaction. And so since this kind of like gas management mechanism exists, it would be, I won't say trivial, but it would be easier to convert that. But I think we also might see people who are actually interested in receiving the end tokens. You might have like folks whose business model is to be like slightly more speculative. Like this has worked very well for certain staking firms, where instead of selling their staking rewards on receipt, they would just hold on to some amount of them, and then every so often, like you get a jackpot, and like that completely changes the complexion of your firm. And so my expectation is that you'll see kind of both models, but I think that the former is going to be a little bit more dominant to start. And then if maybe the market goes crazy, people will be more interested in the latter of like, oh yeah, I'll take your token. Why not? Because everyone here, we've been in crypto for a while. You see this like every time too. At first it's like, no, cash flows, we're selling the asset on receipt. Then the market goes mad, like, I'll take your token, sir.
There is the bear market trend and there is the bull market trend.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also, let's be real, bear or bull, there's always going to be like those degens in us and whatnot that will think about.
For sure. Oh, for sure. There's going to be like,
who's like, yeah, it's a little bit about me.
I mean, no, but think about it too, like, going back to like economic realities, like a lot of who are the ultimate like restakers, at the end, it's not actually like Swell or Rio or Renzo. It's the asset owners depositing their ETH. And for the most part, these are crypto heads. So I could totally see a strategy for, where just by design, like the operator says, you know what, I want to just get a basket here. So we're like, hell yeah, Hyperlane, like basically put us on, like, let us take risk everywhere, in as many places as possible. And we want to basically go as early as we can. And we're not getting paid in ETH. We want to get paid in their thing. And it kind of becomes like this interesting, accumulation strategy. If EigenLayer is as successful as I think as it will be, I'd willing to bet, put me down for $1,000. Like by the end of year one of AVSs being live, there will be someone who wants to go with that strategy.
$1,000 or 1,000 different kinds of tokens?
Are you gonna start the?
I'm like, oh boy, yeah. I mean, I have that little degen in me all the time. So
I know you do.
Yeah. All right, cool. Actually, speaking about operators, and thank you for those answers. Speaking about operators, I think one of the things, and I'm from an operator, right? So the thing that we always try to think about is like, how might it impact our operations, right? How light or heavy it is to be able to run like different protocols, and in something specific here is the Hyperlane AVS, right? So how heavy or light would you say it is to be able to run Hyperlane?
Pretty light, pretty light. That was by design. So the Hyperlane like validator software is non-networked, so you kind of run it in isolation, and then all it really does is it observes some node that has for the chain you validate. So like phase one, you basically just need access to an RPC endpoint for ETH. What you're doing there is you're observing the mailbox specifically. And then once you've observed the incoming messages, you just sign off on them, and you post that signature somewhere like highly available. So for the most part, a lot of different, Hyperlane operators at the moment just use S3. I'd say once like different decentralized storage solutions are like as performant and as available, meaning like that their uptime kind of looks like what you would get with, with big cloud. I'd expect to see more of those being used as well. But right now a lot of it's on S3, and that's really all they need to do. So like we tell people how easy it is to do, and then they're always like, I don't believe you. And then they do it and they're like, shit, really was easy to do. And so it's both lightweight and like fairly low cost. We're talking like the S3 bills on this are like in the single digits. If you're super active on a bunch of chains, it might be like in the teens.
Cool. And let's talk a bit now about like operator requirements, because it's also something that we're seeing like different answers in the AVS space. Will you have like an active set? Will it be like fully permissionless from the get-go? And also, like, are you going to put constraints as to like what other AVS an operator is running? Like, could you say, for example, like, oh, if you're running this AVS, I don't want to share economic security with this AVS because I know it's really risky.
It's a great question. It's, for us, it's actually like less about the risk there. And again, it goes back more to like that willingness to pay, because this is the thing where like restaking is fundamentally different than like, a lot of people talk about it like as a form of rehypothecation. And like, then they go into like, oh, well, look at different forms of securitization. But like, I think insurance is the better analogy. Like, you have an insurer and they have a certain amount of assets that are like the available insurance pool. And so imagine if one of the other insured people, like they have a claim so massive that they basically like empty the pot. Well, you and I were paying premiums the entire time. And now like when it's our time to collect, there's nothing in the pool and we're kind of out of luck there. And so that to us is, it's not so much the like actual risk as like, what's the premium we should be paying for, an AVS that is also active in other places, because we could be like good citizens, right? Like all of the Hyperlane usage might never force a slashing condition, but then someone else just forced a slashing condition and we were paying premiums thinking we're getting, say, $10 of economic security, but now we only got $6. That's an issue. Especially in the Hyperlane case where you see like I think it's not unreasonable to expect that people would want to ensure that the security that they're getting to some extent matches the value that's being transferred. So you probably don't want to secure a $10 million transfer with like, $50K of economic security. And so, I think willingness to pay is really important. And I expect that our willingness and by extent, our users' willingness to pay for what is like shared security among multiple AVSs as being much lower because of this risk of like, well, you might wake up tomorrow and suddenly like the pool of economic security available to you that, by the way, you were paying for this entire time is now considerably smaller and has no way to recover itself. And so like, what do we do then? Do we get compensated for our past premiums? Probably not.
So it's really going to be like a marketplace within a marketplace.
For sure, yeah, which is, I think like that's part of why it's a little bit hard to reason about. And we won't know for sure until it's on, but like, you asked earlier, restrictions or preferences. I think we would have a preference to like work with operators that, are kind of, at least that the amount they stake with our AVS would not be touched. But it's not going to be like a hard restriction. Rather, I think there should be different like classes very much. And again, this is more of like, that bond thinking coming into play again, where, the AAA tranche is the like pristine. It's not being used to secure any other AVSs. And then you would have lower rated tranches, which is like, this 5 million that we're getting from this LRT might actually be present on 7 other AVSs. So our willingness to pay for that is much lower. And, similarly, right, like the prevailing yield should be different to those folks. Because like from our perspective, we are getting just a fundamentally different, like our risk exposure is just different.
Sweet. We are like, this has been a very fun conversation. We have like a broad question here, and then I believe Edgar will take us home. So at least for the broader ecosystem for EigenLayer, right, there are going to be, and there are other kind of interoperability protocols being built, right? We won't call them out here just yet, unless you want to. But do you see them as competitors or partners? How do you like reason about the ecosystem of like interoperability going forward?
No, I think, obviously, like we weren't even the first to try and build this. We talked about IBC earlier, which I guess is, more of like a public good in a way. And there's other folks like, Layer 0 and XR, all like really incredible teams. And so we have to be realistic about it and think that there is, there is competition. There is things that people want to, like how many interoperability protocols are you going to integrate into your chain, right? Like, and so it's certainly a competitive space. For us, it's more about like the thing we try to innovate on is like extensibility, developer experience, and we don't so much try to innovate on the security side. We think that's kind of like, I get it. It's cool in crypto. Like you achieve points by like, how many people did you nerd snipe with like, your new design, but your new design is always like X many units of time, whether it's months or years away from being broken by some more clever person somewhere else. And so for us, we wanted to have this thing that's kind of like on top of different security innovations. And then, you just basically did the thing that now like takes ZK, your ZK prover now like works in like 4 seconds and it's super cheap. Amazing. Guess what's the next ISM that we're launching? That one. And then if you're already using Hyperlane, do you need to rip out everything? No. You just, you were pointing to that module over there. So you had one address that you were pointing at. Now you're pointing to a new address, and that's it. So that's kind of how we think about it. But there are different players that we're more collaborative with because, like, as a team, we're a very open team. Everything we do is open source. Everything's out in the open. Like, we're pretty active in our Discord. We're like have no secrets really. And so teams that want to work with us, we are generally fairly welcoming. But there's a lot of teams in the category that just have a different approach and like no qualms with that. Like, I totally understand why, and I have I don't feel bad or like upset with people for like taking that. Like, it's a super reasonable, rational approach.
Just a quick follow up on that, and then I'll pass it back to Edgar. Do you see this, like, interoperability market, so to speak, as a like winner take most market, right? Because you said earlier, like, like how many interoperability protocols are you going to be? Like,
for sure.
Right. So
I think it's going to be like fragmented across different, market segments. And with each one of those, it is probably going to be a winner take most.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great, guys. Well, it was amazing to have you both. Ben, I love to have you as a co-host. Maybe you guys can share like where the audience can follow you, learn more about Hyperlane, Coinbase Cloud. Jon, if you want, you can start.
Yeah. So you could follow Hyperlane at Hyperlane_XYZ on Twitter. You could also join our Discord if you want. All the links are there. As for myself, I'm at the Pale Nimbus. Maybe I'll drop that somewhere. I'll tell you why that name is one I've used for years. And Ben, let me just say, you should definitely bring him as a co-host. You're so good. I just assumed that you already were. Like you're a natural fit for this.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Edgar, you said like, if you want to reach out to me potentially, then what do you call that? Coinbase Cloud, like specifically you could see their Twitter, right? But me specifically, I'm XB17Z on Telegram. Happy to potentially chat. And if you're protocol and want to talk to me, more than happy to.
Great. Last question, Jon. Math question. What does 1D equal?
What was that?
What does 1B equal?
Next time, you have to bring me on again. And I want to come on with Ben.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for coming. And to the audience, we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much.